Julia, and this is the Biracial Project. Our series right now is on Asian Americans, and today joining me is my friend, Grace Barbo. Hey Grace, how are you
Hey,
doing today?
hey, I'm doing okay. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for joining our conversation. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll just get started with our conversation. I wanted to start off kind of getting to know you a little bit, just asking, what do you do for a living?
Well, right now I'm actually working as an ESL tutor online, which worked out pretty well for me during a global pandemic. But I'm just teaching English as a second language to students all over the globe.
Awesome. So you're teaching students who might be in other countries as well?
hmm Yeah. I'm teaching mostly students in Asia, but actually people all over the place.
Is it kind of like one-on-one sessions, or are you like teaching a class?
Thankfully, it's one-on-one sessions. I feel like I would get really nervous teaching a class. I'm sure I would get over it and be used to it, but I don't know if I would even call myself a teacher. I do more of like tutoring sessions, and it's very unique to each student.
That's awesome. I've done a little bit of ESL, and it's so rewarding, like especially when you see people progressing with their language skills.
Yes, it is so exciting. I've had students who have been working with me for almost 2 years now, and just the progress that I've seen them make, I don't know, it's just really exciting. And the relationships that you build and the things that I've learned about different cultures by teaching online it's been really fun for me too.
Well, like I mentioned, our conversation today is about race and ethnicity. What kind of sparked my first season of this project was just like the racial unrest that was happening this past summer and like the riots that followed. And my goal for the series was to kind of create a space for people to share their experience, especially like from the biracial perspective, because a lot of times you're in between the conversation. So I don't know if you watched my first series at all. Actually, you did say you
I
mentioned
did,
you watched.
yeah.
So yeah, my first series kind of covered the biracial experience of a Black individual. I think, yeah, everyone who I interviewed for my past series was like Black and white or Black and Mexican, and so it was kind of uniform in that sense. So what I'm
hmm
exploring with this next season is the experience of Asian Americans, and so yeah, you came to mind because we grew up together, and
Yeah.
it's so interesting because like I don't think I considered myself biracial as a kid. I was just kind of like my dad is Black, my mom is white, I'm brown, and I didn't really like identify our race. It was just like I'm a brown person. And then growing up with you, like I knew you were from a mixed family as well, but I never really thought about like, yeah, Grace is half Asian. And like I knew your dad's story really well because I remember him sharing it a lot. But
hmm
like it's interesting because like my family is biracial, your family, and then like two other families in the church we grew up in were also like biracial families. So for
Yeah.
I think for us it was kind of like normal. Yeah.
Definitely. I feel like because I grew up around people like you or the other families in our church that were biracial, I definitely never really thought about myself as biracial, just like you said. Like, it just seemed like a very normal thing. Even the childhood best friend that I had when I was like, 6 through 10, she was also half white and half Southeast Asian. So I just felt like, oh, that's just people. Like everybody's a mix of different things.
Yeah, for sure. So, do you mind sharing what is your ethnicity?
Sure. Um, I am half Southeast Asian. My dad is from Cambodia, but he's also part Thai. And my mom is white American, but I believe that her ancestors are from like Germany, maybe Scott Irish, somewhere in there, just like maybe your classic American.
What was it like for you to grow up biracial?
I feel like I didn't really realize that my experience was any different than any of my friends until I probably started reaching my teen years. And that's usually when like teasing and peer pressure and that kind of thing starts. And I did know that, I mean, my dad obviously looks and is different, and he's from a different country. And so I think I was aware of that, but I wasn't aware of any, I guess, different experience until I got, I don't know, reached teen years. And at that point, I just started noticing that the white things about me seemed to get a lot more positive feedback than the Asian things about me. So, trying to think of a good way of explaining, I would get teased about having an Asian looking face or Asian eyes. And so, if I did my hair or makeup in a way that made my eyes look less Asian, I would get positive feedback from my friends about that. And then some good-hearted teasing about my eyes looking Asian if I wore my makeup a different way. And so that led to me being like, oh, I always have to like do my makeup this way, or, just kind of expecting to be teased over my Asian features. Or if I wear an outfit that even slightly resembles something that would look traditionally Asian, my friends would be like, wow, you look super Asian today. And it was like a joke, but it was also kind of like, I felt like my ability to be proud of that culture was a little bit diminished. I think that I'm saying I would just kind of try to look white and bring out the white features in order to avoid that teasing. I think that's where I was.
Okay, yeah. I didn't even know that like there was a certain way to do makeup to make your eyes look less Asian. Do you feel like you had to learn that from somewhere?
I think it just kind of happened where I would like wear thick eyeliner on top or something and not elongate my eyes, try to make them look more round. Um, and my friends would be like, oh, your eyes look like a white person's eyes when you do your makeup like that. And they were saying it in such a positive way that I assume, or maybe just kind of internally was like, oh, so Asian eyes, bad, white eyes, good. And so like that led me to like not like what my eyes look like without all that eyeliner on.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example of society kind of like elevating one culture or people group over another, especially with like beauty standards. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term assimilation, but it's kind of, it's kind of like the majority culture accepting parts of you that look like them. And so, in whatever way possible, they're not, I don't know if forcing is the right word, but they're like encouraging you to adopt
Hmm.
those elements of their culture. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely positive reinforcement for the things that they are familiar with and comfortable with. And they were kids and teens too, so I don't really hold that against them now. I just feel like that it just was part of my experience.
So, what is your earliest memory related to race?
My earliest memory related to race, it's a kind of funny story, but I guess when I was really little, my neighbor who I mentioned before, who is also half Southeast Asian, half white. For me, it's my dad is Asian, my mom is white. For her, it was reversed. Her mom is Asian, her dad was white. And so I guess that her mom let her get away with more stuff than my mom did. And so I got in trouble one day, and as my mom was like, punishing me for doing something bad, I told her, I wish I had a brown haired mommy. She'd let me do it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I know that it like has absolutely no connection, but I think that's kind of the first like time I noticed like the different appearance maybe implied different lifestyles or something like that.
Yeah, I think there is something to say about which parent is like a person of color.
Hmm.
I grew up spending most of my time out in public with my mom. Like I'd go to the grocery store with her and stuff like that. I would say my experience with her was like drastically different than my experience with my dad when I was out in public.
Hmm.
A lot of people thought I was adopted when I was with my mom, but when I was with my dad, it was like pretty obvious that I was probably his offspring. Yeah. Do you feel like you experienced that at all?
100%. When I was a baby, people would ask my mom where she got me. Like, oh, where did you get that baby? And then when I was older, there's a pretty large age gap between me and my younger sister. And so I was like 15 when she was like 3 or 4. And so I would be out in public with my mom or our mom, and my sister would be like, holding onto her sleeve or tugging on her. And I actually had like multiple times other white people would come to me and say, ma'am, your daughter is bothering that lady. I guess they assumed I was like a teen mom and I was being irresponsible and ignoring my daughter. But I was like, as a kid, I didn't even like respond. I just like went over to my mom and was like, Mom, that lady just said something to me. But like my sister and I don't look a lot like my mom. So I had a lot of experiences like that.
But man, wow, that is crazy. So, which side of your race do you feel like you identify with more?
Now I feel like I can equally identify with Asian and white. And in the past, I think that I definitely embraced the white side of my heritage more, as we talked about. But I think that as I've grown and culture has changed, and I've gone through a lot of self-acceptance and like learning about like what my culture and background on both sides really is. So I feel like I can really identify as both Asian and white. And I feel like where I'm living now, which is like Kentucky, a very conservative area, very white area, I feel like here I definitely identify more as Asian because nobody looks like me here. I'm definitely the most like ethnically diverse person. And so I feel like I try to like represent the views of minorities and be the voice of like, well, I know you've had this experience, but you grew up in a small town in the country and you're very white. So like let me try to speak this experience into your life. And a lot of times when I try to do that, people respond by saying, Grace, you're white. And I'm just like number one, I'm just as Asian as I am white. But number two, like it doesn't take somebody of any specific race to be able to like notice that there's another story to be told here. There are other experiences outside of your own. But it's very interesting to see how people identify me because I think that I can identify equally now, but it's always interesting to see how people label me when I meet them.
Can you explain what it feels like when people tell you that you're white?
It's especially when I'm trying to talk or to speak on race issues or the views of minorities or the experience of minorities. I feel like people just don't want to hear anything that's outside of their comfort zone. And that's just a way of trying to silence me and say, like, well, you don't really have the right to speak on this. I don't want to hear it. So it does kind of make me feel a little bit like culturally homeless because I don't fully identify with being white anymore. I am half white, but I'm not just white.
Like you mentioned, like when you're filling out a job application, I mean, any type of like the census, stuff like that, you
Mm-hmm.
start to really think about what your racial identity is and how you're perceived by society and what that means and what scholarships you could get if you put that on
Yeah.
your school application or how you're going to be perceived in a job interview. And it's really, I think it's really frustrating when people label what your identity is because they have no idea what it's like for you to walk into a grocery store or for you to walk into a job interview, or growing up with your last name when you were like when before you were married, and stuff like that. And for them to just based off of what they're getting from you culturally identify what your race is. I yeah, I
Yeah.
I'm very, I would just want people to understand what that means to label someone. Even if you
Hmm.
said, like, I identify as a white person, even though I'm half Asian, for them to be like, well, you're still Asian. Like, for them to project onto you what your race is and not know your experience or what it's like to be in your skin is really hard.
It
Hmm.
is. It's really frustrating. And I feel like if you label me as just Asian or just white, then you are taking away half of who I am. And that's really like, it really hurts me. I want to be who I fully am, and I want all of my background to be accepted by you.
So my next question you kind of covered a little bit. I wanted to ask it again just to see if you have any more thoughts on it. So when we first talked about doing this interview, you mentioned like growing up with some shame in your Asian identity or your Asian side. Did you have other negative feelings about it?
This is um, a really hard question to answer just because of like the hurt that's there. And I feel like my answer is probably not going to make a lot of people happy, but I grew up in a very conservative area, like we're in Indiana, and I was just surrounded by conservative white people, especially like in, not necessarily in our church, but in circles outside of church. There's a pretty major lack of diversity, and even in my own family on my mother's side, I have um, relatives who are white, who have really strong conservative views, and they're pretty outspoken about how they feel about immigrants and refugees and how racism doesn't exist. And hearing that narrative growing up really made me feel like, ooh, uh, if I fully embrace this other culture that is not like the American culture, will they still fully embrace me? And I never feel like any of that was targeted towards my dad, none of that attitude. But my dad also fully embraced the American dream and lifestyle, and he never even spoke his own native language in the home. He fully embraced speaking English. He fully embraced just living out the American dream. And he is an immigrant and a refugee, and also very conservative. And so for these people who I know and love to have these views towards immigrants and refugees, when the only one that they personally know is my dad, and he's, in my opinion, uh, contributed greatly to the United States through his work, through his business, through his beliefs, through the way he votes. It makes me just wonder, like, where's the disconnect? Where are you getting these ideas from? And it scared me. And so I think that I was quiet a lot at family functions growing up, and now being living away from home, I feel like I want to understand what the connection is, but it just created a lot of fear for me about like, oh, like I don't know if I'm going to be accepted by my own relatives if I'm a minority, even though like, I might not be Black or Mexican or come from an Islamic country. I still feel like I'm not quite white enough if I accept my Asian side.
As an adult, how do you feel about your biracial self now?
I feel really proud of myself as a biracial woman now. I feel like because of my history, like growing up in white culture, and my mother's family was the family that we spent all the holidays with, I feel like I have the unique experience of being able to see things from the point of view of a white person, like the uh, culture, the political views. But then now, as I've gotten older and done a lot of self acceptance and done a lot of research to try to learn about my Asian side, I feel like I can just feel really excited about having the opportunity to speak for minorities, speak about my experience, and speak on these things while still having the experience of knowing what it's like from the other side.
Hmm. It sounds like there's still a lot of pain in like the family you grew up in that didn't really accept, or maybe not, maybe accept is not the right word, but who had a different view about immigrants, refugees, and minorities than you felt inside. And I think your dad's experience is so interesting because it's multifaceted. Not only is he a minority, but he's an immigrant. Not only is he a minority immigrant, but he's also a refugee. And so there's like multiple layers to that that you as the offspring of this individual are carrying with you because you've seen and heard his story. And so now carry that with you when you see other immigrants, refugees, and minorities.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think I definitely like when I hear about people with different political views that are so anti-immigrant, anti-refugee, anti-asylum seekers. It really like hurts my heart. um, and I feel like those are the people who I really want to like speak for. And I feel like, what if my father had been trying to get into the United States and had been blocked from doing so, and he had died with the rest of his family? Like, I wouldn't be here. And so that really just, it hurts a lot, to see people holding those views, and to just how they're willing to have such like hate and vitriol towards people they don't know just because somebody told them that that person is going to challenge their way of life.
So, do you feel like you're able to still have a relationship with people who have a different view than you do?
I really try to. I want to keep relationships with people who have different political views than I do because, number one, I've been in their shoes. I've been there. I grew up very conservative politically, and I know what they're thinking. But having people in my life who had a slightly different viewpoint, or just having voices in my life, is what helped me to start to understand and accept myself and kind of see a different point of view politically. So I hope that I can speak kindly into other people's lives, but at the same time, um, I do have to recognize that if somebody just wants to argue and they don't really want to have a discussion, I feel like there's a point where you just have to protect yourself and cut that off.
Yeah. You're like that this is a waste of time. Let's talk about something that matters more. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like I mean, we're in an election year, so a lot of this conversation is like around, like it's just always around. I recently read a verse. Where was it? But I think it was like one of the letters to the church, and it was just talking about like don't get involved with foolish controversy.
Mm-hmm.
There is a time to stand for what you believe, but then there are certain conversations that like they're just like they're kind of foolish, you know. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's so important to know like when to step away from the conversation when someone's just trying to argue with you.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think this is a good question. Where do you think you have found power or strength in being a biracial person?
I feel like as culture has kind of shifted over the past couple years, attitudes have changed towards people of different races or people of minorities, in good ways and also in bad ways. But I feel like seeing other people take pride in their racial or cultural background, it just kind of made me aware that I could do that. I could explore this whole side of myself, and it made me excited. So I feel like actually seeing other people kind of lead the way really inspired me. I think that once I started exploring my biracial identity and being able to speak for people like me, it becomes something that you're passionate about and something that I take more and more pride in as I grow to understand my background. I feel like I just like danced around that question. I'm not really sure if I answered it very well for you.
I love what you said about seeing other people leading the way and celebrating their diversity and like I don't know, maybe if somebody's multiracial, like accepting that side of them and exploring it more. Because I think for me, especially with appearance, I've always struggled with like what makeup works with my skin tone, like how do I do my hair, like in my body
Mm-hmm.
type is different than most white girls and I'm not white so obviously and it's different than most black girls and so it's like this being an in-between person is hard a lot of times but realizing that there's other people like us out there and when you see them leading the way and like kind of showing this is how you do your makeup and this is how you do your hair like there are hair
Yeah.
out there for you put away that flat iron like you know that type of stuff is really empowering and so yeah that's awesome.
Yeah. I love your curly hair, by the way.
Oh, I'm learning to love it.
It's it's hard. I've been working on accepting my curly hair for the past like several years, and I think that seeing other people like accepting their natural hair texture is really helpful. Just like body positivity and other things. Like it's not to be like cliche or like given to peer pressure or whatever, but seeing other people do something does encourage you, and it does really help you take pride in the features that you have that are similar.
Yeah. I love your bangs. I'm like, man, how can I pull off curly bangs?
It's so I at the beginning of quarantine, I got bored and I was like, I should cut a pixie cut with curly hair. So this is just a grown out pixie. I'm still working on growing out the rest. So it's not purposefully curly bangs. It's just like my half grown out curly pixie cut.
It's so cute. I love it. It's super trendy.
Oh, thank you.
What would you say the majority culture needs to know about biracial Asians? Maybe that's
So
a loaded question. I don't know. Is that a complicated question?
I feel like the majority culture needs to, and there's a lot of really beautiful Asian cultures to learn about and understand that I think that people all bunch together, like either like all Asians or Chinese or something like that. And there's a lot of diverse cultures in Asia. And I think that another thing that majority culture really needs to recognize is that when we're in school, we learn about European history. Everybody knows about the Holocaust, but when I tell people that my dad lost half of his family to the Khmer Rouge, they don't know what that was. Like a genocide happened in Cambodia between like 1975 and 1979. Like 2 million people were killed. It was like a quarter of the population of Cambodia. But people don't know about that. Like history books don't talk about the history of Asian countries or African countries the same way they do about European countries. Europe is our history. Those other places are for world history. I think we need to care about the history and culture of what happened outside of Europe. I think our education system could definitely put a stronger emphasis on things that happened outside of Europe. We shouldn't just look at Europe as our history.
There's one question I asked my interviewees in the last series, and it was like, what would you tell your 8-year-old self about being a biracial person?
Mm,
Um, I don't know if you want to answer that one or if you have more thoughts on other things.
yeah, if I could like talk to my 8-year-old self about being a biracial Asian, I think that maybe I would have just encouraged her and helped her see the difference, to know and recognize racism for what it is, which is sin, instead of seeing myself or, my race as something to be ashamed of. I think that people don't mean harm. I want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt because of the culture they grew up in. Bullying happens, and I don't think that I don't hold, the way that my view of myself was influenced by my peers against any of them. It's just part of the culture as a whole. But I think just like recognize that like the parts of me that are Asian are just as beautiful and acceptable and lovable and respectable as the parts of me that are white. And I deserve to have my voice heard as an Asian woman just as much as I deserve to have my voice heard as a white woman.
That's so beautifully said. I
Thank you.
I feel like I wish I could say the same thing to my childhood self too. Like, it's okay that you're brown. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
It's a blessing. That's how God made you. Yeah, that's so beautifully said. Well, I think we're gonna wrap up. But Grace, it was so good talking to you, and I so appreciate you sharing your story.
Thanks for reaching out to me. I was really excited when you reached out to me. And it's just good to talk to you again. We'll have to catch up some more after we get off the call.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, we're going to sign off and talk to our viewers next time. Peace out.
All right.